What's happening, everybody? It's your man, Michael Andreula, up in the podcast studio with Kaite O'Brien from the Straight A Conspiracy. What does that mean? What's the conspiracy? The conspiracy is that people assume that they're not good learners, and that assumption leads them to not perform well in life. They assume that people are just born intelligent and they don't have to do any work for it. It's a bad idea, it's a bad concept, and it's not true. So the book debunks it all and tells you exactly what to do about it. And if you haven't picked up the book, pick up the book, flip through it, and I guarantee you'll purchase it in 2 seconds when you realize exactly the steps to take to get a child or get yourself into a completely different stream of thought, a stream that allows you to pick up topics and just consume them and understand them. And that's what I've been doing. It's an empowering book, and I feel empowered. So we're going to start this episode in hot. Okay, we're going to pop directly into it, and please enjoy the Super Beasley interruptions, and check out the YouTube video for the additional graphics. Okay, enjoy. When I read the book and I look at the book, and I'm big on the book. Why am I big on the book? Because and I talked with Hunter about being dyslexic, and I feel like I've come to a point, and I use it to my advantage in a lot of situations. Mm-hmm. But this book is perfect for people that are dyslexic, or perfect for parents, or perfect for high school kids.
Yeah.
Is that who was the target?
Well, it's interesting, and Hunter and I came at this process, which I think made it successful ultimately, is we came at it from very opposite points of view. Like Hunter, very much his background is in science. He was completely incensed that people do that level of do a certain level of self-diagnosis. I know you guys talked about that, and I mean, you would be amazed how many of my students tell me that they're dyslexic who aren't. I'm like, no, dyslexia is an actual thing, and that can be diagnosed. But people are just so quick to look for a reason to explain why the results they're getting are what they're getting, that, you know, we notice that now. Hunter's perspective is, let's give them the science that will just shut it down. And I was coming at it from, you know, my background is in teaching and in acting, and just, I think, very much paying close attention to people and how they're feeling and what that means and whatever. And so, you know, we had this kind of nice marriage of, here's the science, here are people who are totally intimidated by science. So how do you tell them what it is, and how do you, you know, get it through to them? But for me, so much of it, you know, the target audience really is practically every 14-year-old. Absolutely. I think your experience is interesting, because my dad, I'm pretty sure, is dyslexic. Like, my mom and I are convinced that, but he was born in a time and place when nobody knew what that was or how to diagnose it or whatever. And he's from very rural Maine. There's, you know, it's just not a thing. So he just spent his entire childhood being told that, you know, he wasn't a school person, but it's cool because you're good at basketball, and, you know, just do that and float through. And he always felt like he was stupid and, like, you know, not academic at all. And that totally had an effect on him. In reality, my dad is brilliant. He's the man who can take apart a car and put it back together, fix literally anything in your house that is completely intimidating to many people I know who are extremely educated. You know, like Hunter all the time jokes about how half the things that my dad knows he's, like, terrified to even touch. You know what I mean? So it's all perspective in that way. But when my dad read the book, it had a huge impact on him. Like, that was when I knew that we were really onto something, because he read that chapter about unfair comparisons and sitting in the classroom and seeing the kid next to you who's so fast and who gets everything right away, and just thinking, if that's what it's supposed to look like, that's not me. So this is, you know, I guess I give up on this subject. And that just hit so home for him. He was like, yep, I could tell you who that kid was and what the teacher was who was standing in front of me when that happened. And I remember it like it was yesterday, and that was it. Like, that's how I determined my whole thing, you know. So hearing about those experiences and seeing that, that's when I was like, okay, this is the track that we have to be on. This is where we're going to make the biggest change. Yeah.
And brings me a lot of thoughts go through my head, and when I think about that, because a big part of it is emotional based, and if they are a little dyslexic or they're not, if you get them nervous enough, they're not going to be able to perform anyway.
nobody's good. Nobody's good in that state. And the more that we have the more we've worked with groups of people, traveled around, done talks, since the book has come out, the more we've realized that although while we were writing the book, all of these things seemed equally important to the overall picture, and they are all elements to the picture. Emotions that's the be-all, end-all. That's the king that rules everything. If you can be in control of your emotions when you're learning, that is the answer. That's how you solve everything. That's how you take charge of your education. But it's so hard to see. And for most people, emotions are just kind of a thing that happen as a result of whatever is going on. Well, I did poorly on the test, so yeah, I got angry. Well, no, you got angry, and that's why you did poorly on the test. Yes. Or you got frustrated, that's why the test went that way. You feel like it's a product of it, but it's actually the cause. And, it was always interesting to me because for whatever reason, the majority of school for me was entirely unemotional. And this might be just the puritanical New England spirit or whatever it is, but it's just no, you work hard and then stuff happens. But it's always hard work, So that was just kind of the way that I came into the school process. And as a result, I did really, really well all through school. But for me, it was always that just happens because I work my butt off until it's done. And then I know that it was right, and then it's done, and I move on with my life. And it was never sort of attached to my identity in any way, other than that I wanted to keep up that standard. I work hard and it's always a good product, but it wasn't really about am I a good or bad person because I'm smart or not or whatever. And I would always notice that so many of my peers would be like, well, of course you got an A, it's so easy for you, or you didn't even have to try. And I was always like, in what planet? I am working so hard, why are we not, And so to me, it was always crazy. And then but then I had that same experience when I got to Harvard, because I got in and I was like, whoa, whoops, big mistake on their part. All I do is work really hard. I don't have any brilliance. And so for me, it came later where I made it through high school and was like, yeah, I just live in this tiny town in New Hampshire and I work hard and I get good grades. And then all of a sudden it was Harvard. And that was terrifying. And I was so that's when for me the emotional bomb dropped of here I am now arriving at this school of brilliant people, and the jig is going to be up any second because all I do is try, and these people clearly are going to be nuclear physicists already, and I like to tap dance, what am I going to do here, And so so for the first few months I was completely intimidated, and I got the first bad grades of my entire life and whatever. And then at a certain point I was like, oh wait, whoa, no, all these people are just working hard too. Never mind, it's nothing,
So if anybody out there, especially younger kids, because I try to stress it to them as much as possible, that maybe if they set their sights, they can achieve incredible things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what's amazing is that, there are so many theories floating around about how intelligence works, and people get all excited every time there's a new idea. Well, maybe it's left brain versus right brain. Maybe it's EQ versus IQ. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Maybe I'm I'm a kinesthetic learner instead of a visual learner, whatever. And for the most part, those things have all been sort of not proven to be true. But the reality is that whatever you've heard about that stuff, whatever gets you excited, it doesn't matter. All that matters is what you're doing. And so there can be no such thing as a kinesthetic learner, or everyone, maybe you are one. Regardless, when you get a test back, do you look at the mistakes you made and check them and figure out what went wrong so that next time they don't happen again? Or do you throw it out? When you're sitting in class, are you thinking about what the teacher is saying, or are you thinking about lunch? These are simple things, and we try to find complicated ways to explain away why stuff is happening, but generally in school and in life, so much of it just comes down to, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are the steps you're taking to accomplish your goal? And are you really being as rigorous as you could be? And so often all of the mishigas that we've created for like, oh, and that makes us feel horrible about ourselves, by the way, because you're usually coming up with stuff that's kind of depressing, like, oh, I'm just never going to be somebody who's good at languages or whatever it is. In reality, it's just about practice, and it's just about what you're doing each step of the way. It's so much simpler than everyone has created it to be. And so really that's what was exciting about the book for us, was the ability to simplify and just take all of that out of the process and say, whatever, these are all these thoughts, they're not relevant to you getting this done, you accomplishing your goal. So how do you just do that?
I think it's obviously fantastic. I wish, I'm listening to this, I'm reading the book, I wish I had gotten this advice in grade school, but you could still learn today, and that's what's really, just if it's clear cut, the way you structure it, the examples, you can learn this. It's just reps. And we did talk a little bit with Hunter, but I teach kickboxing, and I teach a lot of beginners, and I teach trainers, and it's very easy comparably to teaching math, because they can see what I'm doing, and in mathematics or a lot of different topics, it's impossible. And just the idea, just putting that idea out there, it's the first time really I've heard it. It was very impactful for me. I just want to, and we're going to pop up a bunch of different cuts maybe of the book and photos. You guys keep it flowing in the book, but you're also giving good graphics, good visualizations, nice tips. It's constantly keeping me engaged. How important was that? Did you model it from something else?
Everything. No, it really came from the fact that when we started this process, because even the process for us of the book was absolutely one of like, just keep going until you get it to happen. Early on, we were working with an agent in New York and thinking we should do the traditional route and go with a publisher and all of that. And the agent loved the book, but basically said to us, look, you're writing a book about neuroscience for kids who hate reading books. Like this is what you're proposing to me. So because of that, this may or may not be like the best-selling thing. She's like, I actually think it will take off, but I don't know that I can convince any publisher that it will take off. And once we really got into that mindset of, okay, so the audience is the most disgruntled 14-year-old possible, right?
Yes.
And if that's the case, when I'm in a tutoring session with a super disgruntled 14-year-old, like, monotony is not the way to keep that kid's attention, right? All the time, like, yeah, it's this. And doesn't that remind you of this song that you know from the radio that's kind of da-da-da? And, and it's very much like, here's every possible way to look at it all the time and keeping it engaging and whatever. And so we really made a concerted effort all the way through the book to make there be almost no pages where it was just text. Because really, at the end of the day, this book is for people who get intimidated by books that they open and look like just text all the way through.
Yes.
But at least if that gives you some sort of respite, there's a break. It's like the thing that my dad said when he was reading it is, he was like, if I get distracted and then I come back to it, I don't feel like it takes me so long even just to find where I was.
Yes.
When I got the page. And even that little bit makes it, I think, a lot more accessible. Plus, we just had fun. You know what I mean? So much of it is that the goal was to take the gravity out of the whole education thing. I think the discussion around education has become really depressing. Like, we're all sort of triggered as soon as it's like, so-and-so is here to talk about education. We're all like, oh God, this is going to be horrible, because we all know the state of education is dire and we don't feel great about our own and all of that, So we wanted to just be like, look, learning is fun. There was a time when everybody just freaking loved learning and it was the greatest thing you could do and people devoured books. And then somewhere along the way, we all got bogged down in the scariness of it all. But, let's get back to the place where it's just fun to find this stuff out.
We have to get this in the hands of the book buyers for the public school system. They're reading Lord of the Flies, they're reading Huck Finn. If they actually put this on the list, and because that's my biggest fear, is the disgruntled 14-year-old still has to be, you got to hook them in somehow. And are those disgruntled 14-year-olds shopping for it?
Yeah, exactly.
But if it's put in front of them and I gift it and people get the word out there and somebody says, let's just buy 60,000 copies, put it in the school system, even some are reading, and the word starts catching on and the kids just outperform and all the results are pulled in. That's my dream for the book. So if you haven't gotten the book, get the book. I have been talking audiobook. I know it's going to be tougher because you have all the graphics, but it could be super cool. Maybe one of the new themes is having a book that also has like videos laid in and graphics and pictures.
Yeah, we love all that idea. I mean, our iTunes version of the book to some extent has a lot of interactivity in that way, but we're also working on our audiobook this summer. So we're going to hopefully have that in time for fall this year, and Hunter and I will be narrating, so it will be...
I would definitely...
quite entertaining. We wrote the book the way we talk, so it makes sense.
When Hunter told me that listening to books was equivalent to reading them, I nearly jumped out of my seat.
Oh, it's the greatest thing. I also, people all the time, because I moved to LA and grew up on the East Coast, and so of course the first thing everyone always says is, oh, I hear the traffic is so bad, the traffic in LA. And what I tell everybody is I am better read now than I have been at any point in my life, because all I do my whole life is sit in traffic listening to books that I've been meaning to read. And it's great. Now I read everything. I'm like the most voracious listener reader that exists. Yeah.
I like to double down. Listen to it and read it.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
I need reps on it.
Absolutely, because your brain is then engaging with the text in different ways, and you're making those connections from different places. Yeah, that's awesome.
Katie, I always think about this, and me and my wife, you're thinking about having children. Do you ever envision like a perfect course from, because a couple interviews, maybe, I'm not sure what the interview you guys were talking about, but you don't want to pump up your kid too much, you were saying, where like tell them that they're great, they're brilliant. You want them to still be a worker. Is there a good philosophy?
I mean, I think, I'm just saying that sort of is the New England philosophy that I think was the reason that was my MO in high school. The shift that Hunter and I are really focused on making, and what the straight A conspiracy, the takeaway can be for parents, I think, is the way in which you talk about what your children accomplish. Okay. I think there is a tendency, and totally an understandable tendency, to praise kids, especially when there are siblings, to praise kids for the talents they're displaying as a way of sort of giving them their own identities. And so, your brother is the academic, but look at you, you're such an athlete, and you're an artist. But that has a way of giving kids early on this idea that there are these sort of set categories. And, if my brother is the one who's the smart one, I guess I'm not. Like, there's some set amount of intelligence that can exist in this family, and he got most of it already, so I don't get to be that, And so what we always encourage parents to do, and there's a sort of a section to parents in the back of the book that is really about this, is just changing the dialogue around accomplishment in general, so that rather than saying, look at you, you got an A, you're so smart, it becomes, look at you, you got an A, you must have worked so hard on this. You must have really been paying attention in class. That's so amazing. Like, you must have really checked your mistakes this time. Changing the dialogue to be about what you put into it, being the reason that you got that out of it, as opposed to just being you, being some natural thing. And so, when that starts to be like, yeah, your brother is great at sports, but you see him practicing, free throws every night outside in the driveway after school, so it makes sense, and it's great, and he's doing an amazing job. But, just making, I like to talk about this in terms of a concept we call invisible work. I think that's what it really is like, if parents and teachers could get amazing at calling out invisible work wherever it exists, it would change the entire way that we all think about learning and accomplishment. Because the reality is, you get to school, or you watch an NFL game, or you go to a show on Broadway, or whatever it is, you're seeing the finished product of what people are doing. You know, you hear a song on the radio, it's 3 minutes long, and that's amazing. But that 3-minute song took dozens of people, hundreds of hours to make perfect. And, you know, like when you see Michael Jordan play, that's not Michael Jordan just showing up and being Michael Jordan. Like, you know, then he goes home and he dissects his game, and the next day he's at practice again, doing the same exact thing over and over until it's just right. Well, that's the same way it is in school. But in school, it's even trickier because all of the work that's happening is happening in people's heads. So the teacher asks a question, and you don't know if the person next to you maybe practices their times tables in the car with their dad every day on the way to school, and you haven't been doing that. Oh, sorry, I should have turned back my phone.
That's okay.
Man,
you get away
so
with anything.
Rude. Who invited this girl? You know, you don't know if that kid did that, or you don't know if, you know, you get to English class and somebody's parents are both writers, so it's normal to them to have been talking about story and metaphor at the dining room table, and that's something you've never heard the word metaphor before. You know, all of that is invisible work. All you see is that kid saying, I think this is a metaphor for communism, and you're like, what? It seems like some pigs are beating up some horses. Like, I don't understand, you know. So it's really that ability to call out the invisible work, and even on a teacher's part to say, yeah, I give the answer really quickly, but I only do that because I've been doing this for 30 years now. Like, I learned long division many, many years ago, and I've done it a million times in my life at this point. And so it's that ability to always say, yeah, that's what you see happening, but here's why. It makes sense, there's a reason, and you could do it too if you wanted.
Who do you got there?
No problem. We're going to go on a little trip.
So let's see. Trust me, my dog's in the other room. I knew.
We're going to walk into this other room now. I like to have a little scenery change partway through my podcast.
Who's the dog?
That's my dog Beasley.
Beasley, that's right, famous Beasley.
Famous Beasley. She's a little rescue scrappy terrier who just walked up to our house one day.
Really?
And was like, I would like to live here. She had no microchip and no collar. We were talking about getting a dog. As the legend goes, you know, she was trapped in a bush across the street and wouldn't come out for anyone. And then my husband walked across the street and she leapt into his arms and had to stay here. That's the story that I got when I came home and was like, who's that? We have a dog now. But Beasley is a very amazing dog.
Fantastic. So the invisible learning part is so powerful. Yeah. It's so interesting, so fascinating, because I'm thinking back to all the situations, and almost in classrooms, you just are put into an order. Like, you just assume that that person's extremely intelligent. It's almost been gifted, and you're somewhere in that mix. But yeah, they've been doing some work. Nobody said that.
There's always a reason, and you know, different studies come out all the time. People ask us a lot. Well, you know, there was just a new article that says such and such about twin studies, and intelligence might be partially innate, and this, that, and the other. It's like, okay, sure, they're finding out different things, they're figuring it out, but the reality is that nobody is probably born with a gene that makes them know the power rule, or you know, that is specifically for multiplying fractions. So if somebody comes in and already understands how to multiply fractions, that came from somewhere, you know. But like, we're not used to thinking in that way. But skills are learned, and skills are practiced, and that's why people are good at them. And so, you know, if we can just get in the habit as parents and teachers, and you know, as learners ourselves, as lifelong learners, of looking at the people who are amazing, who are lightning fast, who just know everything, you know, at the snap of a finger, and saying, okay, well, that's where they are because they've been doing this a lot. And I have been doing it for a week so far, so that's why I'm, you know, slower, or I don't understand it as well, but I can get there, you know.
Not to trip you up, but do you ever look into some of the people that seem to be incredible at particular things, maybe through autism, or one man, I think his name is Daniel Talmott. They did a special called Brain Man. Are you familiar with him, Katie? You know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I do, actually. I'm going to set you up. Sorry.
No problem. And I went ahead and read his book, but it's true. He put all the work in. He was completely obsessed with the numbers. So they presented it as if he just understands number. He did put an incredible amount of work into it. But do you think there's a way to unlock different parts of the brain, or is learning unlocking parts?
Learning is unlocking parts of it. I mean, it's really, I think it's more helpful to think of it in terms of building. Your brain is what you make it.
Sure.
And that's, that's really what we've discovered is so much the thing. All of these studies were out there and they were all very specific and they all came from slightly different fields. And what we set out to do really is just synthesize them, say, okay, here's what everyone is saying, but really what it all boils down to is this little package, which anybody can understand, which is that your brain is what you make of it. And so if you take the initiative, if you are paying attention to your process while it's happening and you're saying, I'm really gonna master this. And so I'm gonna be careful as I go through each of the steps. I'm gonna make sure that everything is working as it should be and that I'm paying attention, that I catch something when it's off and I fix it and I make it better. There's that. Now the next thing that you learn is going to be more meaningful if you're learning it within the context of the thing you just learned. So that's the other thing of why you see people who, for instance, I feel like English, I was an English major in college, and I feel like English is one of those subjects where there seems to be a lot of mystery pretty often. People are like, show up and they just have all these insights about the book, and you're like, what on earth is that? I don't know, I read it, but I don't know where you're getting this, and there's always that one kid who's like, well, I'd like to talk about da-da-da-da, and you're like, come on. So people think that kind of stuff is really magical. In reality, there is sort of a set of rules to understanding literature too. And it just is like the more you've read, the easier it is to see the patterns. The easier to see, oh yes, roses often symbolize this, and when it's, and the cold is usually a symbol for this, and there becomes a structure to that as well. So each new thing that you read, you appreciate more in relation to the things that you read before it. That's how learning works in any area and across areas. You learn something. Once you really understand it well enough to appreciate it, then you learn the next thing, and because you can connect it to that stuff you've already learned and put it in that context, now it all is more meaningful. And then you add on the next thing, and if you're always thinking about it in terms of, how does this relate to what I know? How is it different? How is it similar? How do they matter to each other? That's when you really get to a place where everything locks in right away and everything means more and it's more interesting. It's because it's all of one body of knowledge for you.
I'm using this in exercise and kickboxing.
Yeah.
I have been using it, but I didn't realize that if somebody's completely new, first thing I do is take full control and make sure they're relaxed. If they're tense, they won't absorb it.
Yeah.
And if they were a baseball player or a tennis player, you just quickly relate the movements there to what you want to teach them, and boom, they instantly know how to throw a hook or a roundhouse kick. And if you make it seem like it's complicated, it just makes them lock up.
Yeah.
So it's like a subtle thing you need to do, and I can imagine with children, you have to be so skilled at it. How are teachers receiving this book?
Teachers love it, and we have been hearing even a lot from special ed teachers around the country who love it, and mostly it's because it's kind of it's like not a confidence booster, but it's sort of like a vindication almost for a lot of teachers, because the reality is that once we went to the science, all it did was really support all of the kind of practical advice that we all want to give students on a daily basis. When you're saying you seem like you're getting frustrated and that's getting in the way of what you're doing, that's something that teachers have said forever, but they didn't have sort of the scientific backing to be able to say, no, when I say this, I'm not just giving you advice, like, that's true. And when you walk into a classroom and there's like a poster of a cat hanging from a tree and it says, hang in there, like, okay, great, thanks, whatever, my life sucks, I hate school. But when somebody can say to you, no, actually tenacity is part of the process and it's been proven that this is how you are going to get to the end, here's how it works, that's a different story. And, you know, pay attention doesn't mean anything to a student, but to say, well, here's how your attention actually works. So now you can intentionally pay attention, and you can know how to put your attention on something. You know, so it's really just taking all the stuff that they have said over and over ad nauseum that kids kind of don't listen to, and given them the scientific backing to say, no, when I say this, it's for a reason and it means something, and that's what your brain wants. So here you go. You know, so it is kind of like a really helpful tool in that sense. And I think also in terms of just like helping teachers think about learning across subjects.
Beasley.
I know, sorry.
No. It's absolutely fine. I heard my dog. He was sniffing, hearing Beasley.
I don't know if the better try can go sort of like put her in a cage. But
listen, if they're hanging in at this point, then it's not a problem. This is real life, guys. Sometimes your dog barks, and you got to work through it. Tenacity.
That's
okay.
Right. This is that tenacity that we were talking about.
She is testing you, making sure you stay
right.
focused.
And I am undeterred. I am in it to win it.
if you had and Hunter, he just comes up with so many good things. Yeah. I believe that's where he talks of Cincinnatist. Are you familiar? Mm-hmm. I say, Hunter, I give you full control. You can do whatever you want. China for a day type scenario for the education system. Mm-hmm. What does Katie do? What would you do if you could scrap the whole plan and make this the best educated population in the entire world so that we can go to deep space?
Wow. Okay. This is appealing. What I would do, I would start everyone from scratch, including Beasley. I would start everyone from scratch, and I would teach them how their brain actually works first, before they learned anything else, before they figured out how to be afraid of any subject. Because I think that's what we all didn't get when we started this process.
Katie, why don't you bring Beasley? Just bring Beasley in. Just
stay here for 10 seconds.
Okay.
I'm gonna put Beasley away.
Or just bring her in.
Oh my God.
Hey, I might be barking at the gardener, but you're the one talking to a friggin' matterbox. Who's the weirdo here? I know. I have an Italian accent. I'm an Italian dog. You'll find me on the pizza parlor across the street.
It's really good to see that Katie has to deal with the similar issues that everybody does. You can make it. You could write the book.
So Beasley almost just murdered my gardener, but there we go.
Okay. Well, I was just saying to the audience.
What? My mom?
Sorry about that.
Good. No. I was glad to see you have to deal with the same stuff everybody else does. I don't want you out there just going to Harvard, getting shows picked up, writing the amazing books.
Mostly just picking dogs away from leaf blowers. That's really what it's about. Okay, all right. So what would we do to solve education?
And you're talking to. I'm a 2. What year would you start educating on this? Like 2, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, I would say super early. Yeah, really early on. Even as toddlers, I would start that conversation about results coming from effort, and about the not being naturally good at things or bad at things, but just putting work in, and that's what you get. And when something awesome happens, it's because of your effort, and it's because you tried so hard, and that's really great. You know, talking in that way. And when it came time to start school, I think the first thing everyone should get when they start school is driver's ed for your brain, essentially. You know, so somebody would say to you, okay, here's how, same way that you get, here's how you turn on the car, 10 and 2, adjust your mirrors, put on your seatbelt, that happens before you go, and, all of the rule book and all that stuff. I would say, all right, here's what your brain wants. So when you're trying something and it's not working and you're feeling this way, you might not be working in the way your brain wants to learn. So here's what it likes. It likes to make connections among things. It doesn't like flashcards. And it likes to have you in a calm state where you're open to the information. And the second that you get mad about it, you're essentially telling your brain to shut off. So keep that in mind. You know what I mean? So if you had that kind of guideline, it wouldn't be such a big thing, because we spend so much of our lives in school trying to understand why things are happening the way they're happening. If you already knew exactly why things happened, then it wouldn't be an issue. And then from there, it would really be just about figuring out, how to have an educational system where everyone's in love with learning all the time. For me, I'm actually a huge fan of the flipped classroom model, because I do think so much of the reason that any of us really falls in love with a certain subject is because you're able to get to a certain place of understanding and appreciation, a certain semi-advanced place with it, where you're really getting into the intricacies of why it's cool and why it's relevant and what you can do with it. And if we could, get a lot of the day-to-day kind of plumbing of subjects to be something that students were confident enough and had the skills to teach themselves before a class happened, then they could arrive and teachers would have the freedom to really get into, why is this relevant? What makes it cool? Like, why is this something you should have in your life? I think so often students ask those questions, like, what's the point of this? Why do I have to learn this? I don't get it, da-da-da. And that's totally fair, because somebody may not have explained that to you, So if there was more freedom in the classroom, too, to get to the place where it's like, here's why this matters, and here's what's amazing about it, and think about it in terms of this other thing that and making those connections, the broader scope, and kind of getting past today's lesson is these 3 pages in the book, here's how you do this kind of problem.
So you need exceptional teachers. Exceptional teachers it didn't even matter which subject. When the teacher was fantastic, then, and by fantastic, for me at least, they worked. It was almost like they were putting in so much effort, but they were far and few in between. I don't want to say that I'm sure a lot of
teachers are science. You can't say this does not compute, right?
I think there are a ton of great teachers out there who get a little disheartened by the way that the system is set up, just because you go. Why do you go into teaching? Why do you become a teacher? You become a teacher because you want to inspire kids, because you want to blow their minds with cool information about how amazing the world is, and all of that is possible. But if your school is set up that every day you only have the time to cover the homework, do the little next chunk of the book, and then class is over, and you do that over and over for enough years, that's not really what you signed up for. I feel like there are a lot of teachers that we're underutilizing. But all of that depends on our students having the confidence to teach themselves.
Yes.
If every student came into the process like, oh, well, if this is explained in the book, I can pick that apart, put it back together, and figure out how to teach myself how to multiply fractions. Then you can show up the next day and your teacher gets an entire period to show you why multiplying fractions is relevant to the world and where it comes from and how they figure this out and all the stuff that then makes it meaningful, that really makes it stick for you and makes you appreciate it. So I certainly don't blame teachers. I think there are lots of teachers who are in lots of different situations, not necessarily all of which are set up to help them flourish or to help them do what they set out to do. And I saw coming out of college a lot of people go into teaching with just an unbelievable passion and love and excitement about it, and leave teaching a few years later because it could never quite get to be what they wanted it to be.
Yeah, well, my family was my parents were divorced, but we lived with my mom and my Aunt Ro. She was a teacher since forever. She's retired now, and she would do tutoring with me every single day. But her classroom, she was a real saint. She was a trooper. This was in a very bad area, and she had the lesson plans and stuck with it. But the situation, obviously, in home and family, we need to probably work that into the equation as well. If people are scared for their next meal or their real violence at home, it's going to be tough to teach them. And a lot of people don't think about how bad that's going to be in 20 years when that student hasn't learned and can't. Maybe they make a change, maybe they don't. So people don't want to fund those types of changes, but maybe one day Brian Callen will take over the world and put you in his education czar.
No, it's true. It's true. And so much of that really is, yeah, as a teacher, you're limited by, you only get to see a student for so long. And then everything else that kid is absorbing happens out of your hands, out of your control. And all of those that whole emotional life is really happening when you don't have a chance to interact with your student. And so I have one of my roommates from college was a teacher in Dorchester, Massachusetts for a while, which is in a relatively tough school. And, she said, absolutely the emotions thing is true, but it's not even necessarily possible for me to deal with in my classroom, because half the time, like, a door will slam down the hall and half my class is just gone because they've had a father who's in prison and a brother who was shot in some gang-related incident, and like that's just and then they're gone.
Those mental triggers, right?
No learning that can happen, and so how do you even start to deal with that? You know what I mean? But even just understanding that that's why they're gone for the rest of the class, rather than saying you're not paying attention, what's wrong with you? Like that. Even that is a step in the right direction, essentially.
So right now you're a little bit behind with Hunter. Hunter did a record 27 book mentions throughout the interview, Katie.
I can mention more books if you would like.
What do you read? What do you enjoy?
I'm surprised that Hunter did a 27 book mention. Well, let me think. Let's see what's on my nightstand right now. I have two current obsession projects going on. I read a lot of the same stuff that Hunter does, just because we're always trying to sort of research everything that's out there that's related to the straight A conspiracy and what we're doing. I'm on two other kicks right now. I'm on a Bill Bryson kick, big time, which I just have my favorite things are nonfiction books where people are really, synthesizing a ton of cool information in a way that I haven't heard it before. So I'm reading his book, The Mother Tongue, which is all about the English language and why it is the way it is now, which is super fascinating. And next up, also on my nightstand, is his book, One Summer, which is about America in 1927.
That's funny. Just got that recommended. I heard it was an absolute killer book.
No, I can't wait. Yeah. So I have that, and then the other thing that I'm in the middle of doing is, I should think of a good title for this project. Maybe like Back to the Classics or something. Which is that, I was such a English nerd all through high school and college, and that was great. But now that it's been years since I was in college, I've decided to go back and reread all those books that were required reading in high school and in my college classes. And it's been a mind-blowing thing. It started because I reread The Great Gatsby after the Great Gatsby movie came out. And I had oh my God, such an amazingly different emotional experience reading that book as a grown-up with way more life experiences than I did as a sophomore in high school who was like, ooh, flappers, So then that sort of got me on this kick of, I just reread Anna Karenina, and I'm on Moby Dick now. I'm trying to jump around. I went back to Hemingway for a while. But just doing all the things that were that I've read in my life because they were required. And now I'm now let me go back and read it for fun, because I want to see how I connect with it when I'm not worried about the vocab quiz at the end of this week.
It's so, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I've never experienced any of the things that these people in this book has experienced, totally different. It's very cool. Yeah. It's
a really great situation when you rediscover, I'm not saying I'm an old man, but you can keep learning. You can learn more now than you've ever learned. It's so much information, fantastic authors out there, great books, and Hunter always says it, and he always recommends non-boring books. It's if you don't like reading, maybe the book was boring to you.
I think so. Or you just haven't found the thing that makes you love reading yet. At a certain point, no book is boring. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some people write boring books. That's true. Those exist. They are out there. But I think so often I meet, students or even adults who are ugh, why does anyone still, Shakespeare is my favorite. I get on a big soapbox about Shakespeare, because I used to teach Shakespeare in New York public schools and things, and we would come in to a 5th grade classroom with Midsummer Night's Dream, And the kids would love it, and they would jump on it, and they would be like, yeah, fairies and sword fights, yeah, it's magic. They were so into the whole thing. And then we would this, like 2 periods later, meet with the high schoolers and try to do the same thing. And they were all like, why can't he just write in English? Like, what's the point of this? It's so stupid. Fairies don't exist. And it was all this like emotional wall that had been put up because they were intimidated by Shakespeare. 10-year-olds just hadn't heard that yet, that they should be intimidated by Shakespeare. So to them, it was like mind-blowing imagination party, and the high schoolers like took forever to get them going. And I think that happens for a lot of people where they're just like, why do people still read this? Like, well, classics still get read because they're like the most exciting stories that anyone has ever written, and like people still read them now, even though, yeah, sure, a lot of people are wearing petticoats, but it still matters. It's still love and death and war and, you know, it's all the big things.
Damn, Katie, you're passionate. That's incredible.
But it's exciting, you know. I don't know. I mean, I just.
It's great to see.
It's fun to me to because I love helping my students do that, like find their imagination, find the connection to their own lives and stuff. And so yeah, it's been totally fun to go back to a lot of these stories as a grown-up, and you know, I'm like sobbing at the end of it, or I'm like totally so invested, and I'm like, oh right, last time I read this I had like maybe kissed one boy, like this is totally, now I know what love is, now I did, you know, it's like a new experience. So it's kind of been fun, rather than expanding and just trying to read more books, to go back to some of the ones that I liked before and just fall in love with them again. Yeah.
So this question just popped up into my mind. I write all these questions out and then I never get to any of them. But this, since you are an English major, where did silent letters come from, and why is knife spelled with a K? Do you know? I mean, do we really need them? It's confusing enough for me.
That's fair, and it is unfortunate for people trying to learn English as a second language. Where did the K in knife come from? I don't know the answer to that.
I feel like it's somebody.
That might be a chapter I haven't reached yet in Bill Bryson's book.
I guarantee it's a character like me that misspelled it one time, and just made it the law that it was spelled with a K.
Well, that's what's so funny about so much of it too, is that so much of it evolved before we really had, you know, before people wrote things down. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, this is the same way with a lot of the disparities in Shakespeare's plays. When you read, you know, the first folio versions, and they're like, the spellings are crazy, and some of the stuff makes no sense because it's just later a lot of people are like, oh wait, we should probably write this down so that we can do it again. Wait, okay, what was that? You know, so much of it is just, you know, humans getting in the way of themselves. But
yeah, really. Katie, you're incredible at accents. Absolutely ridiculous. Is this something you've been working on? Is this obviously, what am I asking a dumb question like that? You've been working on them. How do you transition from Southern accent to Boston? What's your real accent?
What is my real accent?
Is this the real Katie?
Yeah, this is the real Katie.
Okay.
Yes, I've been playing a character this whole time. Yes, this is the real Katie. I don't know. I have a lot of I don't know. That's another great example of something that I don't consciously practice, but I really have been practicing, if that makes sense. Like, that's one of those skills where if I try to think about the invisible work behind it, since I was very little, I have always been like running around my house, like telling stories in different voices and like copying funny people from sketches on TV. But I would never, because I wouldn't think of that as work or practice, because I just do it for fun. That's the kind of thing someone would be like, you're so good at accents, and I would be like, oh yeah, it just naturally comes to me, I don't try it. But in reality, that's true. I actually have always just really liked being a goofball, I guess. I don't know.
That's good. How important do you think it would be, theater, drama, acting should probably be more respected in the lower level schools, grammar schools, high schools, because it teaches you so much. As I watch you, I'm trying not to move too much for some reason, but when you talk with emotion, you get into what you're talking about more. It flows a little bit more. do you think we should bring in a bit of everything to schools?
100%. I think one of the saddest things for me, or one of the biggest problems in schools, is the degree to which schools are eliminating everything outside of the core subjects and turning those periods into test prep. The reason that I even got into education in the first place is that there was this nonprofit program during college called CityStep, where we would go into the Cambridge public middle schools, which have like lots of their arts funding has all been cut, and they like barely have gym and things like that. And so we would go in one period a week, we would do dance and drama and things with these kids. Now, not any of these kids wanted to be a choreographer, and that's fine because it wasn't about that, but really what it was using those skills to help kids find confidence. And so often there would be students who, maybe in their more academic classes were sort of the class clown, or just kind of couldn't sit still, or whatever was the thing. And we would work through these activities, and they would start to, create a dance piece or write a scene or whatever that was. And at the end of that, you're still getting, that kid is getting, here's something that you worked on and you created from scratch that is now a thing that people like. And here's a way that you've channeled what is a problem for you when you sit in science class and turn it into something awesome. And just that's those classes that are not English, math, science, and your language or whatever, those classes are often where a lot of kids find their first confidence. And so to take those out, that's where they say, oh no, look at me, I did that, I can do that. And then they carry that into other things. And we would always hear stories from the teachers and the parents, like after a year of classes in drama and dance, whether or not that kid was ever going to do anything related to that ever again, they would just say, wow, he speaks differently now about himself, he carries himself differently, he's got this kind of like confidence and sureness that he didn't have before. And so, I'm just a firm believer in having tons of outlets as a little kid to find the thing that makes you feel awesome about yourself first, so that you then know, then you have the ability to say, okay, so kickboxing, great, kickboxing is your passion, you're obsessed with it, but you know what it takes for you to get good at kickboxing. That didn't just happen. Like, you know how much you practice, and whenever you come home, you're like secretly practicing in the corner while you're watching TV absent-mindedly. You're still going through the motions, and so you know what it took to do that. So just do that in math. Just do that in English. That step is so helpful for so many people, and I think when that gets skipped, it's really, it's like, well, I hope you can find the thing that lights you up in a choice of 3 things instead of 10. It's like, I don't know. Yeah. So I wish everybody got to do.
There's a common saying, or would always talk about it in martial arts, is there's a Japanese samurai author, wrote a book, had a lot of battles. Obviously, he lived, and he mentions if you find greatness in one area, you'll be able to transplant it. He was a great samurai artist, writer. There's as soon as you see the path, you can just apply it. Absolutely,
because that's what it is. Then you can see your own work. You can't see other people's invisible work, but you know your own. Mm-hmm. When people say, "Oh, well, you just are naturally good at that," so you're like, "No, I know exactly what it took to get here." And that is the key. Once you've felt yourself go through that process once, you absolutely can transplant it to any other thing that you do. And that is, the key to being great at one thing is the key to being great at anything. It's the same set of steps. It doesn't matter what the subject is. It doesn't matter what the activity is. It's all the same process. And if people, really got to the place of embracing that, I mean, everyone's potential for just amazing achievements would just be off and up. Incredible.
Well, I really appreciate the time, Katie. I think that if we can get everybody out there, if we can get them charged up, if they can understand that even the book, you don't have to be a a quote unquote reader, as if there was such a thing, it's something that's going to flow. It's going to keep you engaged and it's going to empower you. So those are the most powerful books to me when I feel like I can actually do some more now. We need to see more of Kaite. What about a Kaite, maybe Hunter podcast where you guys are doing a monthly thing, weekly thing? It's almost not a shame that you're doing acting because you're so good off the cuff, your ability to talk about any topic. So is there any final words? Is there any, we usually ask this, but I don't think you need to do this, but would you give, if you could go back in the past and give yourself some advice, say when you were having a tough time, when life seemed like it was giving you a lot of lemons, is there anything you would pep talk, and maybe there's somebody out there just like you? Could you talk to them for a second, Kaite?
Yes. Ooh. Oh man. Okay, it's a two-parter. It's okay. So the first one is obvious but true, which is why it's a cliche. It's because it's true, which is keep going, because there is no such thing as an overnight success. And finally, I feel like all the things that I've been working on are kind of arriving. You know, the book is arriving, and the show that I've been working on is happening. Both of them are a minimum of 6 years in the making. Nothing is just out of nowhere. Oh, and then this person arrived on the scene. You know, that doesn't happen. The other sort of best piece of advice that I've gotten as an adult that I wish I got as a younger person is to look for ways to fit out. Because I think more and more, especially now that there are, you know, with technology, with so many new ways to kind of get yourself out there and to figure out what your thing is, so much of the emotional things that get in our way come from the culture of trying to fit in and trying to figure out, I mean, we spend our youth trying to figure out, where do I fit in? Am I a jock? Am I a nerd? Am I a this? Am I a that? Am I an Englishy person? Am I a math person? What is that? And you're trying to fit into something so that you can, you know, so that you can say, this is what I am. And in reality, all of the people I've ever met who are doing the best stuff are the people who figured out how to fit out, how to say, here's something no one else is doing that is totally me, and I'm going to put it out there unabashedly, and then people are going to get excited about it. And all of the successes, all of the innovators in every field, those are the people who said, okay, great, you guys all have a blast categorizing yourselves into these prescribed things, and I'm going to be over here figuring out what's the most me thing that I can put out into the world, and that I can do, you know, if there's a job that would be perfect for you, invent it. Hunter and I have a friend who, his sort of hobbies that he wished could be his career were being a magician and writing crossword puzzles. And for, you know, he spent a bunch of years out, you know, initially out of college, doing regular jobs out here, developments in, you know, for a studio, things like that. And in the past couple of years, he has figured out how to make an actual career out of advising movies on their magic and like creating this incredible, he just did a TED Talk where he like synthesizes magic and crossword puzzle writing.
Do you want to give him a shout out?
Yeah, David Kwong. He is awesome. Go watch David Kwong's TED Talk, or go see him in person if he's ever in a city that you're in. Because that's like one of my favorite examples of just make your thing. And in the same way, you know, I came out here and started auditioning and doing all the things you should do to try to become what you think an actress is or whatever. And all the coolest stuff that's happened has come from me creating my own projects that I'm like, well, this makes me laugh. Maybe it'll make someone else laugh. And doing it on my own. And that's, yeah. So yeah, fit out. That was long-winded, but fit out was the...
No, fit out. It's brilliant. I don't know if you just came up off the top of your head. If people want to watch The Hub, I go to Indiegogo, or is it now, are we pulling it off?
The campaign is done. So you can go check out our season teaser at watchthehub.com. Or there's a bunch of stuff on YouTube still. If you search The Hub or The Hub Kaite O'Brien or something, I think they come up. We're about to release our new season in a couple of weeks, which will be like a big same, but then you can watch it there, and then potentially soon on your television.
Yeah, no, I appreciated it. I thought it was really funny.
Thank you.
Not only, and it moved quickly, so the jokes were packed in. I forget who you are when I'm watching it, so I guess you are a really good actress.
Nice,
you get right into character. Is there anything else you want to recommend? You want to give anybody shout outs? You want them to follow you on Twitter? Do you care?
Sure, yeah, sure. I'm teaching myself to be better at Twitter. So yeah, my Twitter, we have at Straight A Conspiracy, which is STR8A Conspiracy. My personal Twitter is This Is Katie O, KATIEO. And yeah, watchthehub.com, straightaconspiracy.com. That's our blog, and we're trying to, well, on our blog we post like all the appearances we have coming up and kind of the cool stuff going on with the book, and we post articles from time to time with just advice, ideas, things like that.
Are we ever going to find out what the inside joke about Kansas is?
The inside joke about Kansas?
You don't have to say it, I mean.
Well, no, Hunter, what do you mean? Because Hunter's mom's from Kansas City, right?
Oh, okay.
But Hunter grew up kind of all over the world. But because he never lived in any one place in the United States for very much time, I think he is sort of semi-arbitrarily, but by association, chosen to be insanely excited about Kansas City. See, I mean, all his relatives live there. He's not like from Kansas City, but he, in the way that like I am a diehard Red Sox Boston person till forever. But you know, he will fight you to the death over their barbecue, and
it is quite good. I'm not gonna lie.
We went there, and Oklahoma Joe's was amazing. Yeah. So.
All right, Katie, you need to go. You need to keep on inspiring the world. Keep on working on these projects. We're gonna make a fantastic visual podcast. So if people are listening to this, go watch it. Buy the book. Buy 10 of the books. Give it to all the kids you know. Tell all the parents, and you got to keep that movement going. I can't thank you enough, Katie. This was fantastic.
Thank you so much. This was a blast.
Can you send a picture